Hello, welcome again to lecture series in political theory. You know, I am Professor H. Srikant. So far, I have been giving YouTube lectures on different aspects of classical Marxist political theory. For all that, I have relied on the works of classical Marxist philosophers, starting from Marx and Engels to Lenin and Stalin and to Gramsci and Mao. They're all great political philosophers and also important leaders in the communist movement. But I should tell you that Marxism as a political philosophy has influenced several academicians and intellectuals as well. They may or may not be official members of the communist parties, but these scholars took Marxism seriously, studied, analyzed, and interpreted it in their own ways. Although they may not be known to the grassroots workers engaged in the movements, their names and contributions are familiar to the students, scholars, and intellectuals working in the academia. Louis Althusser is one such intellectual whose contributions to Marxism is acknowledged and discussed in the academic circles even today. He is known for his books For Marx, Lenin and Philosophy and other essays and Reading Capital. I devote this lecture to some of the important contributions of Althusser and focus more on his idea of ideological state apparatus. Louis Althusser, born in 1918 and expired in 1990, he was a French Marxist thinker who advocated what we know today as structural Marxism. He studied and became a professor in philosophy in the prestigious École Normale Supérieure, in short ENS, which produced many a critical and secular intellectual in France. Althusser was also a member of a French Communist Party. The de-Stalinization initiated by Khrushchev in the Soviet Union in the year 1956 did create confusions everywhere, including in the Communist Party of France. Since then, the party started disassociating from the basic principles of Marxism-Leninism and started becoming more and more a social democratic party. In such conditions, Althusser came in defense of Marxism, upheld and further elaborated the philosophical contributions of Lenin, Stalin and Mao. In the mid-60s, left-oriented academic circles in the West were dominated by Hegelian, humanist or empiricist interpretations of Marxism. Opposing these trends, Althusser gave shape to what came to be known later as structural Marxism. Taking clue from the contributions of structuralists like Levi-Strauss and Ferdinand Saussure, Althusser emphasized on the need to understand the structures hiding behind the apparent social phenomena. He was opposed to taking the early works of Marx seriously, as he believed that there was what he called epistemological break in Marxist thinking somewhere in the mid-1850s, which differentiated the works of mature Marx from his early works, where he himself was under Hegelian or Feuerbachian influence. It is therefore necessary to look at the mature works of Marx to understand the Marxian dialectics and philosophy. To Althusser, Marx's Das Kapital shows the way as to how a Marxist should study the social formations. Althusser argues that Marx, instead of starting the work, Capital, with the historicist study of the evolution of capitalism, he begins with the understanding of the basic concepts or categories such as commodity, use value, exchange value, capital, labor, etc. Understanding these concepts enable Marx to probe how the surplus value is created and exploited in the capitalist system. It is only after identifying these basic structures crucial to the study of capitalism that Marx goes on to study the history of primitive accumulation. As such, according to Althusser, understanding the pre-existing hidden structures should precede any empirical study of the human relations. Althusser was critical of economistic interpretations of history, finding the base superstructure interpretation inadequate and at times even misleading. Althusser argued that there are three important structures in any social formation: economic, political, and ideological. These structures are intertwined and they influence one another. Yet, no structure can be reduced to another structure. Each of these structures is autonomous and has its own history and independent time scale. It is this autonomy which enabled Marx to study capitalism separately. Similarly, Althusser argues that it is possible to study political and ideological structures also without reducing it to economic base. To him, all these three structures are important, and any one of them could be dominant at a given point of time. He says economy becomes decisive only in the last instance. To him, it will be reductionist to say that mere contradiction between the capitalists and the workers will automatically lead to revolution. Taking clue from Mao's theory of contradictions, Althusser argued that at a point of time, different contradictions operate at different levels. And an event like the Russian Revolution happened as a result of the overdetermined effect of multiple contradictions operating at different levels. So these were the general philosophical contributions of Althusser. They are no doubt important and one needs to probe. But for the students of political theory, it makes sense to focus on Althusser's theory of ideology and ideological state apparatus. You know, in my lecture on historical materialism, I have explained the importance that Marxism attaches to production in human history, and also discussed the elements of the mode of production. You know, this production is not a one-time affair. It's not enough if you produce today. It is necessary that what you produce today, you have to produce tomorrow, next week, next month, next year as well. So, in order to survive, the human beings should produce all that is required for the existence and growth of human society. That becomes possible if only human beings reproduce the social conditions necessary for continuous production. According to Althusser, that requires, on the one hand, continuous updating of productive forces, meaning science, technology and tools. They have to be advanced, continuously updated and advanced to meet the growing needs of the people. On the other, it is also necessary to reproduce the relations of production. There is not much of confusion about reproduction of productive forces. But more clarity is required on this reproduction of relations of production. As explained in my lecture on historical materialism, the relations of production refers to the way that the people relate to one another while involving in production process. In class societies, the relations take antagonistic character. On the one side, there is a class which owns the means of production. On the other side, you have people who are deprived of the means of production and forced to work for the ruling classes as slaves or as serfs or as wage laborers. For the production to continue in the class divided societies, the exploited classes should continue to be a part of the existing relations of production. That means they have to work, they continue to work as serfs or slaves or as workers. Continuation of production in the given form would not be possible unless the existing relations of production are not reproduced hourly, daily, and continuously. How is this task of reproduction of relations of production accomplished? Althusser says reproduction in capitalist societies requires two conditions: economic and non-economic. Economic is ensured by giving the laborers the material means to reproduce the labor power. That is ensured by giving wages to the workers for their sustenance and for improving their skills. The wages include not only a biological guaranteed minimum wage, but also a historical minimum, which differs from society to society and country to country. So you need basic minimum to survive, but in different societies you need to be little more than the minimum. So that also is the expectations which the capitalists have to fulfill in the form of wages. Since these wages are essential for survival, the workers continue to work in factories, fields and mines. But this economic necessity alone is not sufficient to ensure reproduction of labor power or reproduction of these relations of production. Althusser says, along with economic conditions, reproduction requires non-economic conditions which is secured outside the realm of production. You know, all of us see Hollywood movies. If you have seen movies like Spartacus, Ben-Hur, Gladiator, etc., you would have seen how the repressive apparatus was involved in forcing the slaves to work for the slave lords or for the Roman Empire. There are also many movies on slavery in the United States which show how through repression the state apparatus ensured submission of the slaves to the system of slavery. Similarly, we also have some idea of how the feudal or colonial state have oppressed and exploited the peasant serfs in different parts of the globe. As such, the state in different class societies ensure the conditions for continuous reproduction of labor through direct or indirect intervention on behalf of the dominant propertied classes. Althusser is not unaware of the role of repressive state apparatus in reproducing the relations of production. But he reminds us that alongside the repressive state apparatus, in short RSA, there is also ideological state apparatus, in short ISA, which ensures subordination of the workers and other exploited sections to the rules of the established order. The ideological state apparatus teaches the exploiters how to view and how to handle the working people and keep them under their subjection. It is here that Althusser brings to light the nature and significance of ideology in our social life. As you have heard my lectures on classes and class struggle, you are already familiar with the Marxist saying that in every society the ideology of the dominant classes will be the ruling ideology of that given state. Marx viewed ideology in bourgeois society as false consciousness. Althusser further elaborated a Marxist theory of ideology. He distinguishes ideology from science in the sense that the purpose of ideology is not to provide knowledge. Ideology has more practico-social function. It does not reflect reality, but expresses imaginary relations between human society and their conditions of existence. In class societies, ideologies misrecognizes and misrepresent social reality. What does this ideology comprise of? It comprises of discourses, images, and ideas that surround us all the time, within which we grow up, live, think, and act. Althusser does not look at ideology in an instrumental sense, as if it is something consciously created by the ruling classes to enslave the others. Althusser says that even the ruling classes live and believe in ideology that they advocate or stand for. All agents of production, exploitation, and repression are steeped in ideology. Ideology enables and ensures that everyone, capitalists, workers, managers, and state officials, perform their functions conscientiously. Ideology, on the one hand, makes people believe that they are free subjects, taking decision and holding opinions independently. But at the same time, it makes them obedient, unresisting agents of the existing mode of production. So everybody in this society believe that their ideas are their own and they are not influenced by anybody else. But when they behave, they consciously behave in such a way that their behavior or their practice will be in accordance with the intentions and aspirations of the ruling class. So, without any need for repression, ideology ensures that we think as we are made to think and we act as we are told to act. To put it in the words of Althusser, through mere act of hailing or interpellation, ideology makes individuals as subjects, good citizens, and makes them work as per the wishes of the ruling classes. There is no need for the use of repression at all, except in the case of bad subjects. So this is something, a very interesting thing that Althusser elaborates. But where from these systems of ideas that condition individuals come from? Althusser says that the institutions and practices and rituals, they precede and govern the system of ideas. It is not that already there are ideas somewhere hovering in the mid-air and people take it. For any ideas to emerge, there should be institutions and practices and rituals, and we become part of that. As such, ideas are not the property of individual subjects. Ideology cannot emanate if there are no ideological state apparatus or apparatuses. Althusser identifies different kinds of ISA, taking the form of religious organizations, educational institutions, family, legal and political institutions, trade unions, and mass media, and literary and cultural organizations. And all these ideological state apparatus acts mostly in private domain. Unlike the repressive state apparatus, which operate through repression, this ideological state operates through ideology. In pre-capitalist societies, religious ideological state apparatus played an important role in ensuring the subordination of the exploited classes and communities to accept the rule of the dominant propertied classes. So by invoking the fear of God or sin, the religious institutions ensured that the slaves or the serfs accept their position in the relations of production. The powerful role that the church played in social life in the medieval Europe is something known to all of us. However, Althusser contends that with the advancement of capitalism, religion as ideological state apparatus started taking a back seat, and in its place, education or educational institutions are emerging as powerful ideological state apparatus in the contemporary world. Generally, the people tend to look at education only in positive sense, as something that liberates us from ignorance and leads towards emancipation. But Althusser says differently. According to him, besides imparting technical and managerial knowledge essential for running the capitalist system, educational ideological state apparatus plays an important role in rationalizing and upholding the existing relations of production. From the school days, the children learn the rules of good behavior and are made to accept the existing socio-technical division of labor, so that as they complete their school or college education, they passively perform the jobs assigned to them as per the established rules of the class society. In sophisticated ways, education creates citizens who will be in tune with the ideas and values of the ruling classes. Not just the educational institutions, even other ideological state apparatuses such as family, trade unions, political parties, mass media, literary and cultural organizations, etc., also work in their own ways to reproduce the relations of production compatible with the interests of the ruling classes. Now I come to another important point which Althusser wants to communicate. While analyzing this ideological apparatus, Althusser also points out how this ideological state apparatus is different from repressive state apparatus. Unlike repressive state apparatus, which primarily relies on repression, the ideological state apparatus emphasizes on domination through ideology. It is not that there will not be repression, but that is only a secondary aspect. Ideological state apparatus works in the private domain. Further, unlike the repressive state apparatus, which is homogeneous and well organized, cohesive, the ideological state apparatus are plural, and they often compete and contradict one another. it is in these contradictions that the ISA produces the ruling class ideology. So it is not that everybody speaks the same language in same way. Sometimes you can see church saying something, education saying something, and family as an organization telling some other thing. But in totality, the ideology that they provide or they come out with actually is in tune with the domination of the ruling classes. So it is true that any ruling class which wants to dominate, it should dominate not only the repressive state apparatus, but also it should exercise its hold over ideological state apparatus also. But here Althusser says that it is possible for the ruling classes to lay down strict rules for the operation of the repressive state apparatus. But that is something that they cannot do when it comes to ideological state apparatus. So this plurality of ideological state apparatus or the unorganized way in which these ideological state apparatuses are related to one another, that actually gives a scope for the exploited classes also to enter ideological state apparatuses and express their concerns, thereby making ideological state apparatus as a battleground for class struggles. This is all what I can say about Althusser's Structural Marxism and his understanding of ideological state apparatus. After Althusser, other structural Marxists like Nikos Poulantzas, Balibar, etc. further developed and elaborated his ideas. Actually, this school of structural Marxism paved the way subsequently for post-structural studies. Today, there are many scholars who criticize structural Marxism in general and Althusser in particular for overemphasizing on unconscious structures and for ignoring the role of human consciousness or human praxis. Limitations notwithstanding, I consider that Althusser has to be acknowledged for extricating Marxism from Hegelian and humanist interpretations and for restoring the distinct kernel of Marxian dialectics. Now, before I end my lecture, let me suggest some readings in case you are interested in knowing more about Althusser and his contributions. For the beginners who want to understand his ideas on Marxism, I advise you to read some chapters from Althusser's book For Marx. In his another book, Lenin and Philosophy and Other Essays, there is a chapter on ideology and ideological state apparatus. It is not very difficult to understand these two works, though I consider that the other edited volume, Reading Capital, is a bit difficult for the first timers. As when it comes to secondary readings, I suggest you to read Steve Smith's chapter, Louis Althusser, 1918 to 1990, in John Simon's edited volume called Contemporary Critical Thinkers from Lacan to Said. It gives an overview of Althusser's contribution to Marxism. For understanding ideology and ideological state apparatus, you can see Oxford University Press handbook, Marxism and Ideology, from Marx to Althusser, written by David Leopold. Of course, you will get many other references if you browse through Google or JSTOR. Right at this moment, I stop, and I will be coming out with another lecture next week. In case you like my lectures, I request you to subscribe to my channel, and I also request you to inform like-minded friends interested in political theory. So meet you after 1 week. Thank you very much. Have a good day.